Hey everyone, this is Baylor, and in this quick video we're going to build an Angular application with Angular 4. We're going to separate our components out into modules, and we're going to combine all that or connect it together with ngRouter. Let's get started. So when we build this, I'm not going to do a lot because I don't think that it's necessary to show you all the parts of Angular to actually build an application, but rather just the parts to build what I'm going to show you. And so this is the kind of the finished product. It's nothing spectacular by any means, but it is an application. And what it does is it shows you the time that you start and the time that you close. And when you look at this, you can see that it's formatted this as 12-hour time, because that's kind of what you would expect. But we're actually storing this and holding on to it in the background as 24-hour time. And it's nothing spectacular. I'm going to show you that, and it's like, yeah, but that's how it works, because ideally this would work with a server and you're going to update the time of the database, and you don't want to store that as 5 p.m. like so. And so we have this one route where we show you what it is. You have another route where you can go in and you can edit the hours, and we show the start and end time, same format, and you can edit. And when you edit, it's going to pop up with 3 drop downs, and you can change the time that you start and you can change the time that you close. And when you hit save, it's going to update all the places that store the time. If I did make a change and hit cancel, it doesn't change because of the way we built this, and so that's what we're going to build. And so this is what I've started with, and I've done basically the same kind of thing that I did before, except I changed the background color when I started this. And I don't have a lot to show. I have done just some basic stuff to get this started. I added an app routing, and so we say that when we're on the home page or no URL, we display the home component. And we are going to use writer module for root, and we're going to use hashing so that when we change paths, as you can see at the top, it actually just uses a waffle to separate that, so it's not actually doing anything on the server or with our server routing, I guess. It's not routing, I don't think, a server, but I can't think of what it's called. So we're actually just going to use this so that it actually just works in the browser, and it's not independent on how the server handles URLs. And so we have created these routes, and I've imported that into app module, and this is just a very simple app module, and we have added a declaration for the home component. And we've imported our app routing, and the piece that holds on to the times is this hour service. So I've created a directory called services. I have an hours.service, and as you can see, it doesn't have much in it at all. It is a very light service that just holds on to a start time and end time. And I've just hard-coded this in as 24-hour times. I said that's what we deal with when we're working with times in this case. And when I don't even actually display that. We're going to do that real quick. That's going to be the first thing we do. But to show you real quick, this time component, or it's really like a model or like a value object that does more than just hold values. Basically, we give it a 24-hour time in. We can get back the 24-hour hour. We can get the 12 version of the hour format. Get the minute, we can get the meridian of this if it's AM or PM, and then we can pretty print this by 0 padding our numbers and showing the 12-hour, the minute, and the meridian of that. And I do apologize, I don't know very much about time. I know meridian is the M in antemeridian and postmeridian. I do not know if you just call it meridian. It feels very awkward, but I didn't do any research, and I just roll with that because I don't care. And then finally we have that helper method for 0 padding. And so that's all that this time does. And so when we go to our service, we just pass a new instance of that. And the last thing is it does have a helper so that we can call it a time.from 12-hour time. And we have an interface so that we can define hour, minute, and PM. Yeah, so that's all it does. It's very simple, and it does have unit tests. So what we're going to do to just use this is we've already added that in as a provider for our service. So now in our home component, we can actually go in here. What I've already done apparently is added this. So it's dependency injection here in Angular. When it sees that we have a type of our service, it's going to pass in a new instance of our service. And if it has already instantiated instance our service, it's going to pass that existing instance around. At least that's the experience I've had with Angular. I'm new to Angular, as I said, but I have noticed it's kind of like a singleton a little bit. I guess we call it singleton. So, WebStorm is not happy with me apparently, and I cannot see what. I can't see my HTML. Oh, I deleted it. It's okay. So what we're going to do is just have a pre-tag or a paragraph tag, and we're going to say manage your hours for today and the future. Bang bang. And we're going to put in a pre-tag, and I probably should not do that like this. And all we're going to do is take our current hours service dot start time, and we're going to say pretty print. And we're going to go call our service dot end time dot pretty print, and that alone will actually give us our start and end time. So something I want to kind of think about here though is we probably are going to display times several places of an application. And so what I want to do, and this kind of goes back to this videos about modules and ng router, we want to create a shared module where we can put things like time, and we can actually use that in several places without having to do something weird where we have just a bunch of components that we import over and over again. And so what I'm going to do is, what I'll actually just do is so I'm in my home directory for this business hours where I have, and that was a poor way to do that, but I have the source directory over Angular CLI builds this. So I'm just going to go into it, so source app, which puts me here, and I'm going to say ng generate a module. And if you want to know more of what these are, you can actually run like GitHub or ng help. And if you notice when you see a command, it gives you its aliases. And so ng G is generate and M is module, and to see that you just say help G, and I guess you could write out generate, or I'm just going to do G, and we're going to search, and we have module in here somewhere. There it is, and that's alias is M. So we're going to generate a new module, and we're going to call it shared. And so you can see this generates a new folder called shared, and it creates our module.ts file. So we don't have to do this by hand, and it gives us everything that we need to kind of get this started. And the only change I'm going to make here is that in our app module, I'm going to import that. So we'll have shared module, and I'm going to put that at the top like this. And so when I'm about to run into a problem of me not knowing for certain, when I've done this from scratch, I did not include or import this common module. So I don't even know what this is. I just happened to see it when this is the second time I made this video, and I just saw it the first time when I ran this. And so we're going to try, maybe wrong. Generally what you do is when you import something to a shared module, or any module rather, I do believe, but especially a shared one, if you want it to come back out, so let's say we were going to do the home component here, right? We don't want home component to be part of app module, instead we want it to be a shared thing that we push around throughout the application. When we do that, what we have to do is say we want to export the home component. And so because I'm not familiar with this common module, and it does strike me as being something perhaps that people have thought about in the Angular community, I'm suspicious that I don't actually have to put in this export home component. I can just declare it or add it as a declaration. I don't know if that's going to work or not. We're going to try it. If it fails, we'll just fall back to adding exports, but wanted to kind of throw that out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into that shared directory that was generated for us, and we're going to generate a component. I think actually what I'm going to do is just create it by hand. So we're going to create, and because this is going to be like a super minimal component. So we're going to create a new directory and call it time. And we're going to create a new file called time.component.ts. And so we're going to import component. I'm also going to import input, because what we're going to do is just, well, we'll see, but we're going to take the time that we pass into this and then draw it. And so we're going to import that from Angular core. So we're going to have our component, and the selector for this is just going to be app time. And the reason I'm putting app in there is because I did not modify my Angular CLI.json to remove the app prefix. And then if I do that, WebStorm will throw squiggly lines to say that it requires it. If I take it away, then it's going to say it's not needed. And so I'm just going to leave it. And the template for this is going to be very minimal. We're just going to say time. Because what we're going to do, so we're going to export out our time component. And what we're going to do is accept an input of time, which is going to be an instance of that time class that we saw earlier. And so what we're going to do is, once we have a time, we're going to change this to just render out our time dot pretty time, which I believe is correct. Maybe I named it pretty format. I don't even know. Pretty print. So I was wrong on all fronts. Okay. So it's not happy because we've defined a component, but we've not told it where it lives. So we're going to put this in the shared module as declaration for time component. And so we fix this. And what I'm going to do is go back to app module, and well, we've already have shared component. So that means in our home component, we should be able to change this. So instead of actually calling starttime.prettyprint directly, instead what we can do is just call app time, pass in the time that it's looking for, and give that to our service dot start time. And we'll do the same thing for our end time as well. And I have broken it. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, we're going to add an exports of time component. Perfect. Okay, so that fixes it. Now, I will say that, as I've kind of alluded to before, I'm sure I'm not an expert in Angular. Part of me thinks this is kind of a waste to create an entirely new module, especially in this application, with a new component to simply wrap our time instance or time class to just call it prettyprint. The reason I do think that it helps is, A, we kind of start seeing how to use shared modules. But in addition to that, if we ever did get to a point where we're going to do something different with time, we don't have to try to find every place that we call .prettyprint. Instead, we can just go to the time component and make that change here for whatever it might be, because we might want to start showing the time zone. We might want to do something where if you hover over it, and you can just do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. So that's how we're going to roll with this. And so now that we've added this, we can start seeing our times. We need to get into the area where we can start editing these times. And so let's go ahead and just make a quick commit. And what we're going to do is just say we've added a shared module and time. I'll make that component. And what we're going to do is add, we're going to add navigation, and we're going to add a area of the site so that we can, or a new module where we can edit this time. And so what we're going to do is just go back down into our main app directory. We're going to join a new module called hours. I'm just going to go ahead and go inside of here. We're going to generate a new component for overview. And I'm jumping ahead. Part of this is because I already built this app, so I'm kind of familiar with what I'm going to do, but I don't want to have to keep popping back and forth to add individual things. And so we're going to go into overview, and we're going to add one more thing. And actually I might hold off on this one just so that we can kind of get some more in front of us before we do all this. But while we're here, we have our hours module. We're importing the overview component. And what I want to do is also quickly add routing to this. So we're going to call it hours routing. And we're going to import routes and router module from Angular router. And we're going to define our hours routes. So we're going to say define constant hours routes. It's an instance of routes, or of the type, I guess, which is not an object. And what we're going to do is say our path is at hours, and then we're going to define children underneath this. It's kind of like a namespace. And when we're at the root of hours, we're just going to render out the component for our overview component. And I'll import that. Perfect. And then we'll export our new hours routing, which is router module for child, and we pass in our hours routes. Perfect. The difference between these two primarily is that this one defines the, I call it a namespace of hours, all the routes and components that are rendered inside of there. And when we call router module, we call for child here. And I believe that just does something inside of Angular, so it's aware that this one's the root. It defines when we call double quotes that are blank, empty quotes, where the root's actually going to come from. When we put it in here, it understands that this is actually going to be nested under other things. I guess I don't really know for sure. I haven't tried calling for root and passing options in here, but I do definitely want this to not be considered the root, so we use for child. And we're going to import that. So now we have our hours routing. We have defined that here. And so what we should be able to do is go to here, and if I pass in hours, you can see it actually navigated away to a weird redirect. So I did that correctly, obviously. So we have our overview component. Oh, the problem is I didn't actually import hours module here. Perfect. So now if we go to hours, we should actually see overview component works, or overview works or something. There we go. So overview works, and we can go back to the primary app. And so this adds in our hours module, and what we're going to do real quick is just add navigation here. And so I've already defined the CSS for this. Perfect. So now we have two links, so we can go back and forth between home and our manage hours. So I'm going to make a commit real quick and just say that we've add our hours module and navigation. So now we're getting really close. Let's go ahead and start working on this next piece where we actually are able to click edit and see the time and click edit and actually make changes. And so to do that, we're going to go over here. So we're already on this route, and I'm going to add to our overview component a flag of editing, which will just equal false to start with. And so what we're going to do is just toggle this true and false. And as we do that, Angular is going to show and hide things for us. And so I am going to add two things. We're going to have a start editing, which just tells this start editing to be equal to true, and a stop editing, which will say this editing equals false. And what we'll do inside of our component HTML is just draw a button that when we click it, we're going to set start editing or call start editing, and we're only going to display this if we are not editing. And then I'm going to wrap this in another div, or we're going to have the other two buttons visible here. So they're visible if we are editing, and it's a button to stop editing, and we'll just call cancel here. And I'll call this one save. So we'll have save and cancel. Right now they do the same thing, and all it's going to do is just toggle us in between these two states of whether we're editing or if we're not editing, basically. And it's pretty cool because as you navigate routes, it's going to automatically reset it back to false. Okay, so what we're going to do is, and then we're also going to have a div fields, and the way I'm going to do this is very tacky, I think, but it works perfectly for this video, is add a start time and as a legend, and we'll do the same thing for an end time. And I already have some CSS for this, and so I'm just going to copy that here, or put it in my clipboard rather, so that I can just paste it in. And it's just very basic CSS. It's going to style this button, or all the buttons. The colors are really bad. They look decent enough on the blue background. They look horrible with the orange, just yellow, but I'm going to roll with it anyways. And so, yes, that styles it so it looks different, and we can actually see our start and end time side by side. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we've created a component. Let me just close everything. We've created our component for displaying the time, and what we're going to do is when we're inside of here, we're still going to use the same time component that we've created down here, but we're going to wrap it into something called an editable time, or editable time. So let me go back into that module for our hours. And I'm actually going to go all the way into the overview component, because the way I want to structure this, I'm in my hours module, I'm in my overview component, and the overview component is going to have like child components. So I'm going to make this structure right here that we have for these three drop downs. I'm going to make that an actual component, and I'm not pushing it to shared because right now I don't think we're going to have where you edit the time in multiple places. We definitely have it where we display the time in multiple places, but as far as editing right now, that's simply going to live inside of this hours component or the overview component. And so what we're going to do is just generate a new component, and we're going to call it editable time. And inside of this, I'm going to delete the CSS and the spec file because just to kind of clean it up, and we're not going to use those. And we'll just delete them. Oh, I guess I need to probably remove our styles. Okay. And so what this is going to have is this editable time component. It's going to have two inputs. It's going to have our first input, which is our time, which is very similar to what we have. Which is very similar to what we have as well when we display regular time. And we're also going to take another input of whether we're editing or not. And so what we can do is inside of our overview component, where we display, is that a bug? It's confused from when I was playing with this earlier. We're just going to display our app editable time that takes in the time, and which is going to be equal to our hour service dot start time. And we're also going to pass in editing, which is equal to editing. And I do believe I need to add that hour service to our overview component. And I do. So let's add that real quick. So it's going to be public hour service is an instance of hour service. And I really need to make a change to that TS config so that I can not use, so I'm allowed to use double quotes without adding errors. But for now, I'm just going to keep making that change. And so now, when we look at this, editable time does not display what we want to see. What we want to see is just our app time, just like this. And so it's this editable time right now is just a big wrapper. And I guess I probably need to add shared modules here. So now it's just a big wrapper for showing our time component. But what's really, really cool is because we are passing this in, our editing flag, all the way down into this component, what we can do is say, only show this if we're not editing. Because if we are editing, we're just going to wrap it in a div. And what we're going to output are 3 dropdowns. So I'll have a select, and I'll just put those in like so. And so now when we click edit, you can see it's actually able to swap between those 2 states. And so the way I'm going to do these dropdowns is going to be super, super quick and super hacky. Or I kind of would describe it as hacky. At least you'll see what I'm talking about in more detail in a second. So hours is just going to be a string array, and I'm just going to do it like so. And I'm going to prefix these with zeros. And minutes is going to be a little bit easier because it's not so many. We only have 4 to choose from here. And then finally we're going to have our meridiums, which is just AMRPM. And so we're going to use this to draw our options inside of here. And so we'll say option, and WebStorm is very smart. It knows that we're probably going to use ng4 for this. So we'll let hour of hours, and output the hour. And let me just duplicate this. Okay. So now when we edit, you can actually see that we have our drop downs where we can see the times and make them editable. And what we want to do is take in the time that we're given and select the matching hours and minutes. And so this is fine. Well, the reason I said it's going to be hacky is because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this dot. Well, I guess we need to go a little bit further back. We need to have a selected hour, which is a string, selected minute, also a string, and a selected meridium string. And what we're going to do is a couple of things. First, I just need to import forms module. Here we go. And what we're going to do is bind our ng model to our selected hour. And our selected meridium. So basically what this will do is, as we go through the different options that we defined here, because this is an input and output, basically hook. It's not really a hook, but it's kind of what I want to call it, or event. As we make changes, it's going to update the selected hour, the selected minute, or the selected meridian. But what we can also do is, because we have the square brackets on here, it's going to take the value and push it in. When we call ng on a init, we'll just play with this. We'll say selected hour, and we'll call 09 to start with. And so now when we click edit, you can see both of these start with 09. And so the way I'm going to do this, and that I'm just going to do it and just be happy, I'm going to prefix everything that we get from this dot time dot hour with a 0. This is actually the 12-hour time. And so that'll cast it to a string, and I'm going to call .match, and I'm going to get any digit from the end, only the last two, and just make that my value. And so we'll switch to hour with minute. And the selected meridian is going to be equal to this .time.meridian. That one's easier. So this is like I said, super hacky, but it's the way I'm going to zero pad this because it's just faster for me to just think like that. And I've obviously made this thing super heavy. So that was actually a really kind of a sad thing. I think it even took 20 minutes for me to figure out that I put backslashes in front of my dollar signs. And so I was getting a very weird error. So I'm back. And so what we're going to do is, and you can see I was trying to see where I ended up having the mistake. So now this is actually working. So we're actually able to show our hour, our minute, and our time based on whatever we've pre-filled it in, as in send it in as. And so what we're going to do, now we're able to actually get this, what we want to be able to do is pull it back out. And so what we'll do is we're going to add a method here called we'll call it new time, or we'll call it selected time. It seems to make sense, I guess. And so selected time is going to return a new instance of time. And what we'll do is we're just going to say return time dot from 12-hour time, and we'll say the hour is this dot selected hour. We'll have to call %, on this. And we'll say minute %, this dot selected minute with another 0. And for AM PM, this will be very easy. We'll just say if this dot selected meridian is equal to PM. And so what this is going to do all in is when we make changes to these, it's going to go back and forth between the selected hour. When we load initially, it's going to take in whatever time we are given, and we do this nasty way of saying add a 0 to the beginning of it. That way if it's a single digit, it's going to have a 0, and then take the last 2 digits at the end, and that match just returns an array of whatever is selected, and so we grab at 0. And so now if we play with this, you can see that we have a time where we can play with it. It's pre-filled whatever we match, but when we hit save, it goes back. It doesn't actually grab this. And so what we're going to do is use a thing called viewChild. And what viewChild lets you do is basically grab a hook into a child component. And there's 2 ways to use this that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's hundreds, but, or at least maybe 4 or 5. We can say viewChild. We need to import this, and you can pass in like the name of a component, or so I could actually say editable time component like this, and I could say, you know, time or editable time, right, which would just be a type of editable time component. The problem with trying to do this though is that, or the reason this won't work is because we actually have 2 of these. We have one for our start time and one for our end time. And so what I'm going to do instead is actually reference this. So I'll remove this. I'm actually going to reference this by calling start time. We'll do another one for end time. And for this, I'm also going to do my favorite thing where I replace my single quotes or double quotes with single quotes. Perfect. So this gives us our start and end time components, or at least a way to access them. And to actually be able to use the start and end time, what we need to do is add a ref to this. So we'll call it start time and end time. And then yes, this is just necessary here because we're actually this doesn't tell us what type it is, and so we're typing this so that TypeScript will know. And what we'll do is we won't do this in stop editing, but we will change this so that we'll have a save action or save method. So when we call save, we're just going to console.log out our this.startTime.newTime, which is not happy. It should be happy. Did I name it something different? No, oh, selected time. Okay. Okay, so now you can see it's actually finding the times. When we change this, you can see it's actually giving us back the 24-hour time of this. And this is the time that we need. And so we can very easily update this service and just say this dot hour service start time is equal to this dot start time dot selected time. And we'll change start to end. And then we call stop editing. So if we were doing more than just setting this dot editing to false, we would actually be able to trigger it down, update or omit event or whatever we might do. So now you can actually see that when I hit save, I'm updating this component. If I hit cancel, it doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything to the home. But if we change it, so we'll say we start at 6:15 in the morning, hit save and go, you can see it's updating. And the cool thing about this view child is there's no events to try to hold on to, because if you think about, we have 3 selects here. Trying to do, if we were going to have to do an output here, an event or emit an event, we would have to add like custom getters and setters on all 3 of these, so that anytime any one of these changes, we would send out some unified event, or basically that does this exactly right here. And so also calling view child, we can also pass in the name so that we can pass in or call things by a particular name, right, if we have multiples. And just so you're aware, there's also a thing called view children. I haven't used this, but I believe with this I could have called editable time component and got the times. Problem with doing this is I'm not real certain of the best way to say, give me the start time, give me the end time. I think I would have to do like a 0 index, and I think that's brittle. So this gives us the way to access it by name. It also gives us the ability to strongly type this so that we can say what is start time, what kind of component is it and stuff. So I believe this wraps up our video. We've recreated, outside of the header here, our manage hours functionality. So we can cancel, doesn't actually change. And if we make a change here and hit save, you can see it changes it. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions or questions or comments or anything I can do with this YouTube video and this channel in general, I'm more than welcome to answer it and hear about it in the comments. So goodbye.